Looking through my fighting game history, there are many instances of me seeing a character, expecting them to play a certain way, then eventually dropping them when they don't meet my expectations. I'll give you some examples. Beerus in Dragon Ball FighterZ. When I first saw his orbs and how he could interact with them, like putting an orb on the screen and later hitting it towards the opponent, I expected him to play like another fighting game character that happens to like balls. However, thanks to Super Dash ignoring most projectiles, this was absolutely not the case, and Beerus was soon dropped from my team. Weiss in BlazBlue Cross Tag Battle. When I saw her using her glyphs to amplify her movement during her trailer, I expected the glyphs to be a vehicle for interesting movement options, similar to how she uses them in her original show. In reality, the glyphs that she places on the screen are quite rigid in use and honestly just boring. Dropped. Rize in Persona 4 Arena. When I saw that her toolkit was full of lingering multi-hit projectiles, I expected her to have the type of monstrous projectile set play you'd see from a character like Milia or Kokonoe. But Rize doesn't do that. Ken does, and I hate Ken. Instead of mixing you, Rize just makes you block forever, which ironically is what I prefer these days, but anyway she was dropped. I could name more, but you get the point. When the reality of the character didn't meet my expectations, I lost interest and moved on to someone else. And that's okay to do. Is that okay to do? Well, yes, of course it is. This goes for anyone. If you don't like a character, switch to someone else. I see no problem with that. But are you sure you don't like the character? I mean, I'm just asking because there are many times where I've let my expectations around a character blind me from their real, unique potential. And I have a feeling that I'm not the only one. Fighting games are bigger than ever. We're seeing more tournaments than ever and more learning resources than ever. And while these are great to see, these parts of the FGC are capable of setting up expectations. Expectations of how characters should be. Expectations that you don't necessarily need to follow. Now, I hope that these parts of the FGC continue to grow, but as they do, it becomes tougher to recognize when an expectation may be blinding you from seeing a potential reality. Are you sick of the vague talk? Let's look at an example through Granblue Fantasy Versus Rising, the recent sequel to Granblue Fantasy Versus. Here's Anrei. You may know him as Uno, but for this video I'll stick to Anrei. Anrei is the least popular character in Granblue Fantasy Versus Rising, and everyone on Twitter is making fun of him for it. Wow guys, let's bully the minority. Although his play rate is incredibly low, you'll still find him in top 8 because Senpai Spider, one of America's best players, likes the character. Although I've seen Anrei in the hands of other players from time to time, the majority of my exposure to this character has been through Senpai Spider's style of playing him in tournaments. Based on that, my takeaway was that this character is incredibly dry. I realize that I'm basically calling Senpai Spider out by saying this, but I really don't mean bad by it. Their style of Anrei is an effective one. It's a style that helped them win the first big Granblue vs Rising tournament in America. But, from a spectator point of view, it doesn't exactly look riveting. Senpai Spider prioritizes zoning and spends a lot of the match harassing the opponent with Rakshasa. After seeing this get results enough times, I ingrained the idea that this is Anrei. This is how you play Anrei, this is how you win with Anrei. But I wasn't interested in winning like that, so I never tried the character. That was until a few weeks ago. A new Granblue felt like the right time for a new main. Goodbye Matera. My first choice was Soriz. He takes off his clothes. As fun as he was, meter gain is way up in this new version of Granblue, meter that I felt reluctant to spend playing Soriz because I needed that meter to take off my clothes. But harboring all of that meter, waiting on a comeback mechanic, instead of just using the meter when it arrives, felt like a waste. But that's when I remembered, doesn't Anrei also have an install? Oh yeah, he does. We almost never saw it in the first Granblue Versus because meter was more conservative and spending it on the install felt like a waste. I didn't much care for this character, but I'd never tried him or his install myself. Meter is more expendable in this new Granblue, so maybe the install could be useful. Or even better, maybe the install could have something fun to offer. Well no, I played a bunch and my conclusion was that this install super is basically useless, the new mechanics won't let you have fun with it, and you're definitely wasting your meter if you activate it. I would have called my experiment with Anrei a failure, at least in regards to the install it definitely was. However, it turns out that this character has some interesting tools that nobody talks about. Okay, so the install took me nowhere, but I discovered his counter. Yes, we all know that Anrei parries things and counters things, whatever, but what I hadn't known is that one of Anrei's many counters is great at punishing projectiles mid-screen. Nobody ever tells you about this counter because nobody ever plays Anrei, but when they do, they usually shut down projectiles by using Rakshasa and then outzoning the zoner. But I don't want to zone, I want to go in. And I think that countering a projectile and charging at them is a super cool and unique way of doing it. So my current game plan is to go forwards. If they use a projectile to try and poke me, I'll counter it and get right in their face. If that scares them away from using projectiles, I'll move closer and we can play a good old game of footsies. I'm just kidding, I'm only gonna press dash L. But should I be rushing down with Anrei? Everybody keeps saying he's a zoner, so that's what he's supposed to do, right? You tell me. He's uniquely good at baiting throws, he has very cool close range combos, and I like using his parry to scare people into sitting still. This playstyle works for me. It's the one I like best. But it's a playstyle that I wasn't immediately able to see for Anrei because his tournament representation put a strict expectation in my head. I found this random tweet from one of the rare Anrei players out there and it says, "I must be playing Anrei wrong if I feel I can't win without being aggressive. What the F is this?" And to that I'd say, you aren't playing the character wrong just because you decided you need to play aggressively to win. It's probably a case of your expectations for Anrei clashing with your real experience of Anrei. Even when we're able to recognize that we're playing off of an expectation, going against that expectation isn't an easy process. It's a simple one, but it requires a lot from you. You need to feel comfortable feeling lost in a character, you need to be okay with losing a lot while you learn and discover, and you need to trust that you can develop your own logic of how to win rather than following the steps that everyone else tells you to take. In carving out my own style for Anrei, I didn't scroll through his Dustloop page and instantly see the whole picture. I had to paint it myself, bit by bit, figuring out what I like, seeing what sticks, and removing what didn't. To the fighting game veterans out there, when was the last time you sat in training mode with a character, noticed something unique, and tried to make something out of it? It's not an entirely lost method, I'm sure many players still do it, but I think it's worth being reminded. But if you're still new to fighting games, I do struggle to give the whole "just do it your own way" as a piece of advice. I mean, you absolutely can, that's what we all did many years ago when there weren't so many learning resources. However, when you are new, you'll likely win faster if you follow someone else's steps. It can be extremely hard at first to understand where you're going wrong in matches and what needs to change. Even when you ask for advice, I find that many players are quick to push their own ideas of how to play onto you, rather than listening to your own mindset and working out the next steps together. The point is, if you're new, don't sweat it. Focus on having as much fun as you can in any way you desire. I think you can still have a lot of fun figuring out a character by yourself, but if someone gives you a great guide on how to win with your character and it's working for you, there's no reason to stop. In fact, many modern guides written by players are great at introducing tools and their potential purposes to you without forcing a strict idea of how to use them down your throat. But every guide is different, and some guides can still give you particular expectations. I think Bedman's Starter Guide is a bit guilty of this. Absolutely everything about Bedman's official starter guide emphasizes the error mechanic, the special move follow-ups that make this character unique. The script, the footage, all of this starter guide is about this mechanic, and none of it is about Bedman's incredibly unique movement. It makes sense that this guide spends a lot of time on the error mechanic, it's supposed to be Bedman's standout feature, but this guide in no way replicates my experience with the character. Bedman saved Strive for me. I enjoy playing Strive when I play Bedman, but the error mechanic has contributed very little to that enjoyment. Nearly all of my fun comes from handling Bedman's unique movement. Of course, when anyone boots up the game and starts using the character, Bedman's strange movement is pretty hard to miss, but what happens next may be greatly influenced by having seen Bedman's starter guide. The player who hasn't seen or heard anything about Bedman may notice this movement and fixate on all of its possibilities, while the player who watched Bedman's 5-minute starter guide is more likely to neglect exploring the fun of Bedman's movement and opt to focus on making good out of Bedman's errors. I don't like the error mechanic enough, so it wouldn't have kept me on the character, but the movement? That saved him for me. But again, all guides are different. I love the kind of guide that highlights everything unique about a character and throws a few potential ideas at you.
As for shurikens, whether you stand and throw it, short hop throw it, or full hop throw is up to you.
Bedman's starter guide isn't necessarily bad. It's nice that the developers are explicit about how they intend for the character to be played, but again, it sets an expectation and it has the potential to pigeonhole you into a certain way of playing. Just try to keep an open mind. That's my message for fighting games going into 2024. There's no need to forcibly reevaluate everything you know. Sometimes you just can't strain a wider use out of your most linear tools. But if something does catch your eye, maybe you find it cool or maybe you're just curious, trust yourself to see an idea through. Don't let your expectations of how things should be get in the way of how they could be. That's been a lot of the fun in fighting games for me throughout 2023. I love going into a new set with a friend, ready to show off some new idea I came up with, and I definitely fell a lot. Some things turned out to be pretty useless quite quickly, but when something really worked, that feeling is very hard to beat. And then your friend is going, that's so cool, while you're busy beating them up. Gotta love fighting games. But I guess that's it for the year. This channel grew quite a lot, so thank you to everyone that watched these videos. I'm glad you enjoy listening to my thoughts, and I'm glad that I get to share them. Thank you for the likes, the comments, and thank you to every single subscriber. Your support keeps me making these videos. And shout out to that guy at my local who snuck up on me and said, "I like your videos, but you're against my friends, so I hope you lose." Time for the new year. I hope you all have a nice one, but goodbye for now.
Happy New Year! Let us make this yet another great one.